unfolded, and more of the people on board, the Prime Minister of Canada, Harjit Sajjan, the Minister of National Defence, and the Chief of the Defence Staff. Let's listen in live.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone.
Yesterday, a Royal Canadian Navy helicopter on a NATO mission, carrying 6 members of the Canadian Armed Forces, went down with all hands in the Ionian Sea off the coast of Greece. They were flying from the Canadian naval frigate HMCS Fredericton, home port of Halifax, as part of Operation Reassurance. 1 casualty was recovered and 5 are missing. All of them are heroes. Each of them will leave a void that cannot be filled. On behalf of all Canadians, I want to offer my deepest support to their families, their friends, their shipmates, and their fellow CAF members. This is another very hard day for Halifax, for Nova Scotia, and for our armed forces families. I spoke to NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg earlier this morning, who offers support and assistance in the times to come. In the coming days, there will be many questions about how this tragedy occurred, and I can assure you we will get answers in due course.
Yesterday, a helicopter of the Royal Canadian Navy went down carrying 6 members of the Canadian Armed Forces in the Ionian Sea off the coast of Greece. This frigate was part of the HMCS Operation Reassurance mission, and there was 1 casualty recovered and 5 people missing. They are all heroes. On behalf of all Canadians, I would like to offer my support to the family and friends and to the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, to the people of Halifax and to the people of Nova Scotia. We are with you.
In a season of grief, a time of hardship, heartbreak, and loss for so many Canadians, the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces stand tall. Bearing the maple leaf on their shoulders, they are known around the world as beacons of civility, compassion, and courage. Whether combating terrorism, standing by our partners and allies, or supporting peace operations around the world, they do what they always do: step towards danger so the rest of us can stay safe. Operation Reassurance is Canada at its best, bolstering security and stability in Central and Eastern Europe. Here at home, we turn to the forces in times of flood, fire, or other natural disasters. They never say no. They always put their shoulders to the wheel. And now, as we battle the COVID-19 pandemic, the Canadian Armed Forces are on the front lines in our seniors' homes, helping to protect and care for our most vulnerable citizens. Even as up to 915 soldiers are deployed on Operation Reassurance in Europe, reinforcing NATO's collective defence, the CAF will soon have more than 500 serving in 13 long-term care facilities in and around Montreal. And more will go in as they are prepared for this work. Earlier this week, CAF teams were deployed to assist in 5 long-term care facilities in Ontario. These people are working day and night, helping to protect our parents, our uncles, our aunts, and our grandparents.
At this time of grief, the women and the men of the Canadian Armed Forces keep their heads high, proudly bearing the maple leaf. They're recognized worldwide as models of civility, compassion, and courage. Whether they're called to combat terrorism, to stand alongside our partners and allies, or during peace operations, they do what they're used to doing. They step towards danger to ensure our security. We turn to them in Canada when there's a flood, a forest fire, or another natural disaster. They never say no. They're always ready. And now, as we're facing a pandemic, the Canadian Armed Forces are once again here for us. They're taking care of our seniors. They are helping out at seniors' homes. 915 soldiers are currently participating in Operation Reassurance, and soon there'll be more than 500 members of the Canadian Armed Forces in long-term care homes in Montreal, and others will join them soon. Earlier this week, members of the CAF were deployed in 5 long-term care facilities in Ontario. Our members work day and night to protect our parents, our aunts and uncles and grandparents. They deserve our recognition.
Whether at home or abroad, the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces are the hand of our intentions, the concrete expression of our valor and values as Canadians. And so we stand with them, and we hold out hope to find the missing. Once again, thank you for joining us. I will now turn it over to Minister Sajjan, General Vance, and Deputy Minister Thomas.
Thank you, Prime Minister. As the Prime Minister has said, yesterday we lost contact with a CH-148 Cyclone helicopter deployed on board HMCS Fredericton. The helicopter was involved in an accident while it was participating in NATO allied exercises as part of Operation Reassurance off the coast of Greece in the Ionian Sea. Since yesterday, I've had a number of conversations with the Secretary General of NATO. We remain in contact with Italy, Greece, the United States, and Turkey, who are assisting us in the search and rescue efforts to help us find the Canadian Armed Forces members who were on the helicopter. Through the night and day, ships, aircraft, and helicopters were engaged in search and rescue efforts. I want to thank all our allies for their support on this. As of this morning, this is what we currently know. The cause of this accident is unknown at this time. We can confirm the death of 1 member of the Royal Canadian Navy. Search efforts are still ongoing for the remaining 5 missing members. We have recovered the flight data and voice recorders from the helicopter. A Canadian Armed Forces flight safety team is departing today to begin their work to find answers for the families and loved ones. And the families and members on the helicopter have been notified. The families of the members of on the helicopter have been contacted by the Canadian Armed Forces. The Chief of Defence Staff is making sure that families are kept up to date with information on their loved ones. We will continue to provide all support to the families who are affected by this. As we receive new information, the Canadian Armed Forces, the Department of National Defence, and I will continue to update Canadians as soon as it is appropriate to do so. I've also spoken with my parliamentary colleagues from the Conservative, Bloc Québécois, and the NDP to provide information on the situation, and I will be updating them later today. Our government, the Canadian Armed Forces, the Department of National Defence, and all of Canada are with the families and loved ones of the Canadian Armed Forces members who were on that helicopter. Canadian Armed Forces members come from across Canada to serve their country. But I know that for the community in Halifax and Shearwater, Nova Scotia, where HMCS Fredericton and where the crew of this Cyclone helicopter is based, this incident impacts them in a profound way. All of our Canadian Armed Forces members serve our country with dignity and courage. I want to recognize our women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces for the work they do on international operations to support peace and security around the world, and their efforts here at home during these challenging times in support of our efforts to stop and slow the spread of COVID-19. This selfless service by the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces is what our military is known for. And I want to thank them for all the work they do to keep Canadians safe. And we will be there for the families, the friends, and loved ones during this difficult time. Thank you. And now I'd like to turn it over to General Vance.
Thanks, Minister. Prime Minister, good morning. Bonjour.
Good morning.
Fredericton and its CH-148 Cyclone helicopter were deployed in Operation Reassurance in support of NATO assurance and deterrence measures. Approximately 240 members left Canada in January 2020. They had just marked their 100th day on operations and were due to return to Canada in July. L'NCSM Fredericton et son hélicoptère
The HMCS Fredericton was deployed as part of a reassurance mission to do assurance for NATO. There were 240 members who left Canada in January, and they had just spent their 100th day participating in the operation, and they were expected to come back to the country in July.
I tell you that the body of Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Calbro, Marine Systems Engineering Officer, has been recovered, and 5 crew members remain missing.
It is with deep sorrow that I announce that the body of Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Calbro was found, and 5 members of the team are still missing.
The missing at this point out of sensitivity for family. To their family and friends, to the family and friends and shipmates of Sub-Lieutenant Calbro, our thoughts and prayers are with you during this difficult time. To those of you in agony, awaiting the word on the fate of their missing loved ones, we stand with you and are searching as hard as we can. There are no words to describe the pain that you feel right now, nor are there any words that can ease it. Please know that the entire Canadian Armed Forces, and clearly the country, is with you. To
the family of Sub-Lieutenant Calbro and her friends, her colleagues, I offer my sincere condolences. I can't imagine the pain you're experiencing right now, and there are no words that can relieve this. However, know that all of the Canadian Armed Forces and Canada are behind you.
4:35 p.m. Eastern European Time, the helicopter air detachment, call sign Stalker, took off from HMCS Fredericton during a NATO exercise off the coast of Greece. HMCS Fredericton was working alongside an Italian and Turkish ship understanding NATO Maritime Group 2 and was conducting basic intership training serials. The Cyclone helicopter had conducted flight operations and was returning to the ship. At approximately 6:52 p.m., the ship lost contact with the aircrew, and a few minutes later, flares were spotted in the water. At 6:35,
At 6:52, the call sign Stalker was participating in a NATO operation, and the HMCS Fredericton was beside an Italian and Turkish vessel and was conducting basic training serials. The Cyclone helicopter was doing air missions and was returning back to the vessel. Around 6:52 p.m., the ship lost contact with the helicopter crew, and a few minutes later, flares were seen in the water.
Search and rescue efforts were immediately launched with every available resource from Fredericton and members of SNMG-2. We are grateful to our allies, especially NATO allies, Italy and Turkey and the United States, for their assistance and their support and their continued support during this difficult time.
Operations for search and rescue were immediately launched with all available resources, and also those of the permanent second NATO mission. We are grateful to our allies, notably those of NATO, Italy, Turkey, and the United States, for their help and support during this difficult time.
As of this morning, the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder have been recovered. An aircraft is being dispatched to collect those recorders and bring them to the National Research Council for analysis. A flight safety investigation has been initiated, and a flight safety accident investigation team, similar to what the Transportation Safety Board would dispatch, will depart Canada today or tomorrow to investigate the circumstances surrounding this terrible accident. On date de ce matin,
As of this morning, the flight data and voice recorders were recovered. A flight is being sent to recover these recordings and to bring them to the National Research Centre in Canada for analysis. An investigation for flight security was launched, and a safety investigation team similar to the one that the Transportation Safety Board would dispatch will be leaving Canada today or perhaps tomorrow to investigate the circumstances around this terrible accident.
HMCS Fredericton and our allies continue to search the area. A support team is en route to help with logistics and support. Pour l'instant, for the time being, HMCS Fredericton continues its search for the missing members. A support team is en route to help our personnel with logistics and support. This is a time of agony for all families, friends, and fellow crew members. There is nothing worse than sending your shipmates over the horizon and losing contact. We have contacted all next of kin. We will provide them with all of the support and resources we can to help through this difficult time.
I recognize that this is an agony, time of agony for family and fellow crew members. There's nothing worse than to lose contact with a crew member. We contacted all next of kin of the victims, and we will provide them with all the possible support and resources to help them get through this difficult time.
I am very proud of our brave sailors and aviators deployed on Operation Reassurance and the work that Canada's military personnel do every day for global security and to help their fellow Canadians at home.
I am so proud of our brave sailors and aviators that are deployed as part of this Operation Reassurance, and they work every day to ensure global safety and to help Canadians.
My thoughts, all of our thoughts, are with all of you. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you, General Vance. Prime Minister, Minister, as a naval veteran, the daughter of a naval officer, and the wife of a naval officer, this tragedy hits home, for me, especially hard, as I know it does for so many members of our wider defense team. We know that all Canadians extend their deepest sympathies to the entire crew of HMCS Fredericton, who served shoulder to shoulder with their lost shipmate. As Deputy Minister of National Defence, I and the entire defense team stand ready to support the Minister of Defense, the Chief of Defense Staff, and all of those impacted by this truly difficult time. Thank you for being here, and we will now take your questions.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. We'll go to the phones first. One question, one follow-up. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Bill Curry, the Globe and Mail, line open.
Yes, I think a question for General Vance. What can you tell us about Sub-Lieutenant Calbro, why she was on that helicopter, since we understand she's not a normal member of that crew?
Right. Thanks, Bill. All of the details surrounding why she and one other were on the aircraft will be released as we get through the investigation. It'd be premature for me right now to describe anything beyond the facts we have right now and that I've given you. Suffice to say, she was authorized to be on the helicopter, and further details about her, her family, and anything pertaining to her will be released formally later when we can confirm all of the details. Thank you.
And then for the Prime Minister, if you don't mind, a question on another topic. The Parliamentary Budget Officer released a report this morning saying that the federal deficit could reach $252 billion, and that it could climb higher if the current programs are extended or if the government approves fiscal stimulus measures when the economy recovers. So at what point do you reach the limit of what Ottawa can afford in response to COVID-19, and how will your government deal with the new debt once this crisis is over?
Right now, we are focused on supporting families through this crisis. We need Canadians to stay home. We need Canadians to take the measures that will protect themselves, their loved ones, their neighbours, and our healthcare systems. And that's why we have made sure that we're sending help to the millions of Canadians across the country who need that help, whether it's through the Canada Emergency Response Benefit or the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy or other measures. We will continue to support Canadians to get through this in the best possible way so that our economy can come roaring back afterwards. Our focus is on what we need to do now to get through this. And I have tremendous confidence in Canadians' ability to keep going and to come back stronger than ever afterwards. Okay.
Our priority in the current situation is to help the families and to support Canadians who need this so that we can do what we need to do, namely to stay at home, to be there for each other, to prevent COVID-19 from taking too many lives and from overly impacting our health system. We are going to continue to be there for Canadians, and Canadians will continue to be there for each other, for their neighbours, for our workers on the front lines of the healthcare system, and I'm very confident in our capacity to bounce back afterwards because of the decisions and the actions we're taking now as Canadians. Inaudible. We don't have details right now about the various members that were on the helicopter, including Abigail Cowborough. We will have more details after we conduct our investigation, and we will give you precise details then. Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Marie Bastel.
Marie Bastel from Le Devoir. Question. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. To follow up on the question about that Bill asked about the PBO's report this morning, we've seen now that the debt to GDP ratio is now 49%, and I realize you're insisting what we have to do, we need to do to help Canadians, but people are starting to wonder, how are you planning what will happen next to get a grip on our finances? Are you thinking about a specific tax or a way to pay back this money once this crisis is over? Answer. First, we're remaining focused on this crisis right now. We recognize that, yes, we have to help Canadians, but we also have to invest to ensure that an economic recovery will be possible as quickly as possible. That is why we've made the necessary investment to help families. Yes, we recognize that this is an economic crisis that will be tough, that is tough right now for many people, and it will last for a certain period. But at every stage, we have to ensure that the economic recovery will be possible. That's why we've kept people with ties to their employers through the wage subsidy. We've provided support for people so that they continue to pay their rent. We've provided assistance for companies so that they can keep cash reserves and pay their employees and keep their employers and ensure our economic health. This is the best way that we'll be able to get out of this crisis in good shape and to be able to ensure that the economic recovery is as strong as possible. Follow-up question? I understand, but with all due respect, it doesn't really answer my question about what will happen next. How do you expect to gain a grip on the economy? Do you have any measures in mind with respect to austerity, taxes, or are you expecting to run up deficits of hundreds of billions? Answer, of course, we're going to have to think about this, but for the time being, we are focused on what we have to do now to help Canadians to get through this crisis. We're lucky to have had one of the best debt-to-GDP ratios in the G7. There are many economies throughout the world that we compare ourselves to, and we are in a good budgetary position to be able to make the necessary investments to help people now, but also to be able to rebound afterwards. Canadians are extraordinary people, and our institutions are strong, our economy is strong during normal times, but we'll also be able to show great health. We'll be discussing measures in due time that we'll have to take, depending on how this pandemic unfolds.
Obviously, our focus right now needs to be on how we get through right now to support Canadians, to support workers who've lost their paychecks, to support families who need to take measures to protect themselves and to protect our healthcare system. At the same time, our investments have also been focused on making sure that when we are able to get the economy back up and running, it will be done quickly and strongly. That's why investments like the emergency wage subsidy or the Canada Emergency Business Account are there to ensure that businesses, that our economy are able to hold through this difficult time and come roaring back afterwards. Canadians are a strong and resilient people, and our economy was in great shape before going into this. We had one of the lowest debt-to-GDP ratios of most of our comparable countries, and that left us in a great situation to be able to make the necessary investments to see us through this the right way. There will be time after this is all done, as we figure out how exactly this unfolds, where we will have to make next decisions on how that recovery looks. But right now, our focus is on getting through this together as a country.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Andrea Dunn, the Chronicle Herald. Line open.
Hi there. I'm wondering, I don't know who the best person to answer this question, perhaps Vance, but I'm wondering if there's been any consideration of grounding the rest of the Cyclone fleet because of this. Are they, what's the plan for that?
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. We have put the fleet across Canada and overseas clearly in an operational pause. It's not a grounding, it's an operational pause until the commander of the RCAF and his flight safety team can determine the next steps. We will try to get back to business with those helicopters as quickly as we can, but we have to rule out that there's a fleet-wide problem, and we're going to do that as quickly as we can.
Just a follow-up question. I'm wondering, you mentioned that there was some flares spotted, but was there any sort of Mayday call or anything issue? Could you provide any information about that?
Right. Honestly, I have to wait, as do we all, for any details that come from the flight recorders, voice and data flight recorders. Anything we have right now has been passed in the heat of the moment. I can tell you what is known, and I have. As far as any further details, they will have to come as a result of an investigation.
Details, all details will be coming with respect to this helicopter after the investigation is conducted. I forget your other question. Yes. All the helicopters that are CH-148 are on an operational pause. This will allow the flight safety team to determine if there was an issue with these helicopters. We're going to continue operations as quickly as possible. Next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question.
Next question. Émilie Bergeron, Agence QMI. Question. Good morning. My first question is for General Vance. Can you specify what operational pause means in terms of grounding these helicopters? Answer. I think I understood your question. An operational pause is established by the Canadian Armed Forces for two reasons mainly. One, to allow the members of this community to have a moment to think about their crew member. It's important. This is a rather small community and close community. They lost a member of their community, and it's hard for them. Second, we have to eliminate or rule out any problems. So it is a pause that is temporary to allow the Canadian Armed Forces to look at this quickly. Thank you. My next question is for Mr. Trudeau on another topic. Yesterday at the House, you weren't exactly clear about your intentions in terms of companies that benefit from tax havens. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to clarify this. Will these companies be able to get the wage subsidy or not? Answer. We've always fought against tax evasion and avoidance. We've invested in unprecedented measures with the CRA to ensure that there are consequences for any company that seeks to not pay its fair share of taxes. We are going to continue to apply consequences during this crisis and this pandemic. Our priority is always Canadian workers who need support this time, and that's what we're going to do.
Good morning, Charles, Toronto Star. General Vance, condolences on the loss of your members. Could you give us any more details? Though I understand you said that recorders were recovered, so have you recovered the wreckage of the chopper as well? And I just wonder, if not, what is the challenge presenting you in those waters?
Right, hi Tonda, thank you for the condolences. The recorders broke away from the helicopter on the crash and floated, and they had a beacon that's automatically set off, and the ship and the ship's crew were able to find that the beacon and therefore recovered it. As far as we know, they're in about 3,000 meters of water in the Ionian Sea. And so the search continues, and until the search is done, we won't really know the disposition of any wreckage. But suffice to say that the Standing Naval Group is doing their best to conduct the search. There's a fairly sizable debris field, and they need to search through that debris field. And I don't know what other capabilities will be brought to bear over time. I have to leave that to the investigation.
I understand you say an operational pause, not a grounding. So what are your concerns, though, around this helicopter, which is supposed to be state-of-the-art?
Well, honestly, Tonda, I don't have any concerns about the helicopter. It's performed terrifically. It's got 9,000 hours on the fleet. We've had one other incident, which was a hard landing a little while ago, but that was because of a very unusual gust of wind that knocked the helicopter around. These are, as you know, superbly trained crews, pilots. electronic systems operators, and so on. It's a powerful helicopter with fantastic sensing capability, and it's about to go through a second block of upgrades to integrate that sensing capability. It's a sub-hunter, and it's good at it, way better capability than we had with the Sea Kings. And so I don't have any lack of confidence in the fleet. This is an accident we don't know until we know. We won't be able to make any judgments on the airworthiness of the helicopter. The commander of the RCF is as for this operational pause, he's the airworthiness authority for the Canadian Armed Forces. It's his decision to do that for the two reasons I described. One, sympathy to the teams who fly, the small community, and the other is to rule out anything immediate that they would have to take care of to be able to resume flying operations. Quelle question? Okay, nous avons.
I have a lot of confidence in this fleet of helicopters. They are state-of-the-art. These are new helicopters with a capacity for finding submarines, and the electronics on board are top class worldwide. So we have a lot of confidence in this fleet. And this operational pause was implemented by the Air Force commander to ensure that there's no obvious issue to ground the fleet. Hello, Raymond Fillon, TVA. Prime Minister, I'd like to go back to the PBO's report. You said earlier that you remain focused on the crisis and you'll think about what happens next later. But in terms of increasing taxes, is it something you've ruled out, or is it a possibility? Answer: we're not thinking about that at all right now. We have great trust in the economic recovery and in the ability of Canadians to resume economic activity and to prosper. We've seen this for many years. Our economy's fundamentals remain very strong despite this crisis, and all countries are facing great difficulties economically, and Canada started this crisis with a better debt-to-GDP ratio than many of our partners, and we are going to be able to get out of this crisis, I hope, in a better position than other countries. And we shouldn't have to take any exceptional measures. We're here to work together on an economic recovery, and I have great trust in the capacity of our Canadians and in our economic recovery. Thank you. Hello, Christian Noël, Radio-Canada. General Vance, can you be more specific about the nature of the mission? Was it a surveillance mission for enemy forces? Was there any contact? I'll allow you to take notes. Was there a contact after the end of the operation when the troops returned to HMCS Fredericton? Were the flares automatic or were they manually engaged? Did the crew send a distress signal? Answer: it's rather technical, and I'll answer in English if that's all right. I understand your question.
Let me be very clear. Operation Reassurance is an assurance and deterrence measure, meaning that the alliance has put on the ground and at sea capabilities to tell Russia and any adversaries to not interfere with European security, North Atlantic security. And it's also to assure allies that we are all in this together. And Canada has been present, particularly at the maritime mission, without fail. At the time of the accident, the Standing Maritime Group was conducting training and not conducting surveillance or particularly targeted operations on any particular vessel, adversary or otherwise. There was no, from what I can tell, we can't rule anything out, but I'm quite certain from a military situation, this was not a function of contact or a shoot down. I want to make that abundantly clear. And I just lost the thread on your left.
Or the manual or the automatic?
As I understand it, from what I was briefed, that the flares would go automatically when it ditched. That will be determined more fully by the flight safety investigation. Merci.
Thank you.
Prime Minister, can I, Tom Perry with CBC, can I ask you about another matter? We've seen a list of assault-style weapons that your government is considering banning. Can I ask why this list, why not other weapons, and the timing? Why are you doing this now? Is it because of the Nova Scotia shooting?
We have long been committed to strengthening gun control in this country, including banning military-style assault weapons. There is no need in Canada for guns designed to kill the largest amount of people in the shortest amount of time. That was a commitment we made in the last election, and it's something on which there is a large consensus by Canadians who want to see less violence and fewer deaths from gun violence in this country. We were ready, almost ready to go on measures to do just that when Parliament suspended because of COVID-19. And we will have more to say on this when we make an announcement around what we're doing to strengthen gun control in the coming days.
We have made a firm commitment to Canadians to ban military assault-style weapons because in Canada, there's no room for weapons that were made to kill a large number of people. There's a consensus across Canada that we have to do everything we can to protect Canadians and their communities from gun violence. And we have committed to do exactly that. We were almost ready to announce measures to strengthen gun control when the Parliament was suspended because of the pandemic. And we will be making announcements in days to come, and we'll give more details on this then.
Last question.
Prime Minister Janet Silver, Global News. Just to switch topics again, if you will. Were you or anyone in your government aware back in January that China had engaged in a global effort to procure PPEs and have those sent back to China? And if you or anyone in your government knew about this, why didn't you try and stop it?
As of January 2nd, our Chief Public Health Officer convened a group of provincial public health officers to advise that there were reports of a new virus present in China. Our intelligence services were tracking and aware of the issues, and we got regular updates through the month of January. Further than that, I don't have anything to add.
Thank you. That concludes today's press conference.
Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, that is the Prime Minister of Canada, as well as his Minister of National Defence and the Chief of the Defence Staff, General Jonathan Vance, talking about the crash where 6 Canadians were on board during a NATO training mission, 1 confirmed dead at this time, but the search and rescue mission for information, for debris, and for the bodies of the 5 that are missing continues. I want to bring in my colleagues in just a moment to go through some of the various details that we found there. But first, I want to go to Brenda Shuchuk. She is the grandmother of Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra, and we have reached her in Toronto, where I think we're just still getting the audio working. Brenda, I don't know if you can hear me. It's Rosemary Barton.
Yes, I can, Rosemary. Good morning.
Good morning. My deepest condolences to you and to your entire family.
Thank you. It's a difficult time.
What was Abigail like? She was a young woman, obviously very focused. What kind of gal was she?
She was just a bundle of energy. She had long, luxurious red hair, and she just was a tempest in a teapot.
Sounds like my kind of gal.
She definitely would be your kind of gal.
What brought her to the Navy? Why did she get involved? I don't know if it's a family that's involved in the Canadian Forces, or if this is your first person.
Not really. Her mom and her second husband moved to Peterborough, and Abigail has 3 brothers, Simon, August, and Sebastian. And when they moved to Peterborough, Tanya decided that she was going to put them into cadets. And she knew basically that she was never going to be able to afford to send them to university, and she really hoped that they would choose the military as a career. So they got into cadets, and Abby realized from that she could have a very good career in the Canadian military. So she graduated a couple of years ago from RMC in Kingston and was posted to Dartmouth as a sub-lieutenant in the Navy upon graduation. So it was basically the story of join the Navy and see the world. This deployment was actually her 3rd in the Mediterranean region, and she loved the sea, she loved the Navy, she just loved everything about it.
And she had been on this mission, that General Vance said this was about 100 days they had been away, expected back in July. What was she doing? What was she telling you her days were like over there during this mission?
Actually, I'm going to take 1 second here and pull up my last communication with her, because she told me exactly what her days were like. She said, I'm going to read it to you. I'm really enjoying myself here. My day consists of an early morning run and a workout, studying, learning, working on equipment, because she was an engineer, and eating meals and snacks and reading a good book before bed. So at this point, they were told that they couldn't stop at the ports and get off the ship. So the one thing that she loved, because Abby loved food above everything else, and she just loved the port stops and literally got to see the world.
So she was the big sister to 3 brothers. Have you talked to them today? Have you talked to her mother, her father? Can you give me a sense of how people are doing?
We got the call last night from her eldest brother, Simon. He's 22. He's in the Army Reserves, and the younger son is also in the Army Reserves. So they got a visit by 3 officers in military uniform. So they knew right away that they live in Toronto. They knew right away that something tragic had happened. And so Simon called me and said, Grandma, can we come over? And I said, well, no, you can't, because me and Grandpa are isolated. We haven't seen family for a long time. We get our groceries dropped off on the veranda. And he said, Grandma, we really need to come and see you. So I pushed back again, and he just said, Abby died. We need to talk to you. So they came over, and we put the rest of the family on WhatsApp, and we talked for hours and shared our stories.
And how are people doing? I can't imagine, in the midst of everything that we're all going through, now having this. It's
tragic, and everybody that I know, will say that a child should never be taken before an elder. Like, it's backwards, and it's so hurtful, and we're all in so much pain. She was a ray of light. Everything that she did, she was so passionate about, and she was just, whether she played her pipes or walked in a room, she was just a presence. And even, I'm sure you guys can see her Facebook postings and the folks that are putting messages up, but she touched lives everywhere.
What will you remember most about her, Brenda, as your granddaughter?
I went away to do my degree when Abby was about 5, and I came home from being away for a couple of weeks, and she just bounced in the house with her ringlets and curls just all aflutter, and she ran into my arms and she said, "Grandma Brenda, I missed you so much. Let's go on your big bed and read a good book." But that's just who she was, and it just continued her whole life. She just was a force, absolute force. She played in many military bands and tattoos, and she was a really well-known piper as well. So it was one of her hobbies and something that she did extremely well.
You know, one of the things that we talked about when the shooting happened in Nova Scotia, and we'll have to talk about again here, is the fact that because of the pandemic, you won't really be able to have, you know, a memorial for Abigail, a funeral for Abigail. I wonder if you've given that any thought yet, or how much more difficult it's going to be because of that.
Yeah, it will be difficult. At this point, when we were talking last night, although the military had stopped in to talk to Abby's dad and her older brother, they couldn't give any information on even when the body might be sent back, and there might be some restrictions because of COVID. So that also is a concern. We at this point, we don't know. They were hoping to get some more details today. They've been assigned an officer to be with them 24/7 until some of the information comes forward and they can settle in a little bit and know what the next steps are going to be.
She was in the Navy, but she was on this helicopter. Did you know she was going to be on the helicopter? Do you have a sense of what that work would have been?
No, not at all. No idea. No idea. I even read this morning that the helicopter was assigned to the HMCS Fredericton. So I really don't know what their maneuvers, what their purpose was.
The fact that she was in the military and lost her life on this training mission, what does that mean to you, that she sacrificed so much for something her country asked her to do?
Yeah, but it's the kind of girl she was. She was a very principled young woman, and if called to duty, she would take the call.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't know her. She does sound remarkable.
She really, really was.
Brenda, everyone in the country is thinking of you and your family right now, and wishing you all the best, and really just sending you lots of strength during this difficult time.
Thanks, Rosemary, and I also want to extend my condolences to the other families. Yes. I mean, it's painful, but at least we know that Addie was found, and that we can start to grieve. The other families must be just in devastated states.
Yeah. Brenda Shuchek, I know it's not easy to talk, but important for us all to get to know your granddaughter. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
It's Brenda Shuchek, the grandmother of Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra. Okay, I'll bring back my colleagues, Vashi Capellas, David Cochran, and Murray Brewster, just to go back to some of the details of what we learned of the accident and what we will continue to learn. Murray, I'll start with you because you're the senior defense writer, about what stood out there in terms of new information that may have brought you any sort of better understanding of what we know now.
The reference that General Vance made to the accident site being about 3,000 feet of water, that really struck me, because that's approximately 10,000 feet. That's very deep. And he also made reference to the debris field being spread over a wide area. Although they didn't say it, it's pretty clear now to us, based upon those statements, that this is why there's not been much clarity in terms of what happened and in terms of how many victims there potentially might be. And it also explains why they were so careful to say we have 1 dead, but 5 missing.
Right.
So I would also suggest that this could potentially be a long rescue/recovery operation. They weren't very specific about whether this is a search and rescue or whether this is a search and recovery, because there is a very distinct difference between the two. And that's the main thing that leapt out at me right away.
They have found the cockpit recorder, the black box. There is a team dispatched over there to do what would be sort of like the TSB's work during an accident. So they obviously have sources for more information to understand what might have happened. I'll just get you, Murray, before I get everyone else in, also to weigh in on the fact that the fleet has been paused, put on an operational pause. Didn't sound like General Vance was overly concerned at this stage with the aircraft itself.
Well, General Vance was very specific in terms of his support for the aircraft. He said that he's not had any concerns about it. He reiterated a lot of things the defense officials have told us over the last couple of years since the Cyclone came into service, how good it is in terms of its ability to be able to spot submarines, what a quantum leap forward it is in comparison to the Sea Kings. He was very careful, though, about answering questions about whether or not there is any idea that this could have been mechanical in any way. And given the fact that the aircraft was flying and had been already on a mission and was on its way back to the HMCS Fredericton, that is a significant bit of information. That means that everything had been performing normally, and there were problems up until a very sudden incident of some kind. So, and the fact that there is a large debris field indicates that not only the aircraft hit the ocean hard, but it broke apart. So, that's going to make the investigation in particular kind of difficult, time-consuming, and complicated.
Yeah, and we don't know, and he was asked pretty clearly whether there was a Mayday call. He didn't want to go down that road at this stage, although flares were spotted, but they would have gone off automatically when the helicopter went down, he said. So again, not a lot of understanding of how that might have unfolded at this stage. Marie, I'll keep you there for a moment, and I'll bring in Vashi Kapelas to tell me what you think on the helicopter part, what stood out there for you in terms of these very early hours of trying to understand what happened as they continue to search in that, as Murray says, really large debris field.
Yeah, that of course stood out to me, just the size of the debris field. I think as far as the investigation knows, we do know via General Vance that both recorders, the cockpit and the flight data recorder, have been recovered, and they're actually coming back to Canada. They will be analyzed at the National, I think he said National Research Centre. Yep. And then as well, there is a team from the Canadian Armed Forces headed over there to assist in the investigation. So it sounds like there is at least the beginning of a very thorough investigation, and the fact that the data is there lends itself to the idea that there will be a conclusion reached at the end of the investigation versus, so many other instances, not necessarily pertaining to the military, but when we talk about crashes where you don't have that data available, nor is it in the hands of Canadian investigators. So that really struck me. And then also something Murray mentioned that I just want to pick up on, the description of how routine the exercise was. So General Vance was careful to point out that this was just a training exercise. There's no evidence of contact, no evidence of a, quote unquote shoot down, nothing like that. And that it was about 6:52. They were headed back when contact was lost. And then just a few moments later, they saw those flares. So that sort of, I think, gives us an indication of something happened, right? Something went wrong. And also on the question of the fleet, very careful to say they're not grounding the fleet, that this is an operational pause, that they want to make sure, of course, that the entire fleet is okay. But he was explicit when he was asked by our colleague at the Toronto Star, do you have confidence? Are you concerned about this fleet? And he said, I do not have concerns. I don't have a lack of confidence. Obviously, they'll await the outcome of that investigation, but significant that the fleet is on operational pause right now.
And I'll also just add that we know that there were 240 members on on the HMCS Fredericton, who left in January. They were on their 100th day or so of operations. That mission was slated to end in January. They are supposed to return. Obviously, right now they are dealing with a devastating situation for the whole crew that is there. David, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this as we come to the end of our coverage on CBC television, just whether there was anything there that you picked up on as needing further analysis or talking about there.
The thing that strikes me is sort of the terrible irony of the forces dealing with this tragedy while their members are being deployed to deal with the tragedy here in Canada, in particular in the long-term care homes. It's one of those days. In Ontario and Quebec, more than 500 soldiers are going to be deployed into the long-term care homes in Quebec. And how much we rely on the armed forces in these times of great national urgency, right now with the medical crisis that's going on, but even earlier this year when they went to my hometown of St. John's to dig everybody out from the snowstorm. And for them to have done so much this year to help and now deal with this, like I said, 2020 has been a terrible, terrible year.
Yeah, definitely tough for the whole country. Thank you all for your coverage, your help with the coverage here on CBC television. I'll be back to you as we end this special. I'll just bring everyone up to date then on what we know now after that press conference from the Prime Minister, the Minister of National Defence and the Chief of the Defence Staff. We know that five Canadians are still missing at this hour, that one Canadian, Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cabra, has been identified as the first victim of that accident, that it was, of course, part of a NATO training mission, that they have already, as Vashi talked about there, recovered much of the data that they are going to need to better understand just what went wrong in this cyclone helicopter. But the debris field is large, and so the data will help certainly, but the investigative team that is over there right now as the recovery and search mission continues, or rescue mission continues, it'll be important to try to put those pieces together as they try to understand just what happened with this helicopter. The helicopter fleet itself has been put on an operational pause right now, not because General Vance says he has a lack of confidence in those helicopters, but the head of the Air Force does this in part because, of course, of what the tragedy, the people that are part of the Air Force are dealing with, but also to make sure that there is not a fleet-wide problem, that this is a one-off accident, if you will. I will also tell you that they expect to bring us more information, obviously, as events unfolded. They don't know a whole lot about how this unfolded, only that the helicopter was coming back from a training mission. They made very clear it was a training mission, that flares were spotted, flares that would have gone off automatically, but we don't know really how much of this unfolded as of yet. I'll just also say thank you to Brenda Shuchuk, the grandmother of Sub-Lieutenant Abigail. I know lots of people are surprised that the grandmother wanted to talk, but she did want to talk, and she wanted to make sure we all got a sense of who her granddaughter was, and we appreciate that. That ends our coverage here on CBC Television for now. We'll have more on the pandemic coming up on CBC News Network and CBC.ca. I'm Rosemary Barton. Hello again. We welcome back to Ottawa and CBC News Network, CBC.ca. I am Rosemary Barton. We're going to switch gears and take you back to our ongoing coverage of the pandemic, COVID-19. This, of course, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, giving us an update right now. Let's listen in.
Some are helping to get needed supplies to the front lines, while others are joining the front lines themselves, where possible, to help those in need. Many of these efforts have started as grassroots initiatives by everyday Canadians using their skills, creativity, ingenuity, and generosity to help in any way they can. A great example is Conquer COVID, that began like the little engine that could in one family's home in Markham, Ontario, until it picked up steam from two of Canada's big names, Olympian and hockey legend Hayley Wickenheiser and actor Ryan Reynolds. They joined forces with Conquer COVID out of a shared goal to provide PPE for our healthcare workers. Another Olympian, Joannie Rochette, have just received her medical degree last week, is now heading straight to work to help in long-term care homes in Quebec as they bear the brunt of this epidemic. These Canadians exemplify what it takes to get down this mountain, the precision and grit of an Olympian with a can-do attitude and a readiness to help others. To all Canadians who are helping in innumerable ways, thank you. Merci.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tam. Et maintenant, je donne la parole.
Now I give the floor to Mr. Howard New. Thank you, and good afternoon. As usual, I will start with the latest numbers on COVID-19 in Canada. There are now 52,057 confirmed cases, including the first case in Nunavut. There are also 3,082 deaths. To date, labs across Canada have tested over 800,000 people for COVID-19, with about 7% of these testing positive. This week, things have been a little flat, just like the COVID-19 curve. And that's got us all quite excited about what this means for getting out of our houses. Though, as I've already said before, we have to be very cautious going down the side of the epidemic curve. It would be a whole lot easier if this was a well-trodden path, with many who have gone before us. But we are largely new explorers, so we'll need to curb our enthusiasm and tighten the safety ropes for the way down. Already on this path, we've seen worrisome transmission events emerging. Having learned a lesson about vulnerabilities in long-term care homes, we're now tackling introductions and spread in certain work settings and congregate housing. I'm also concerned about increasing numbers of COVID-19 in First Nations communities in several provinces. We must get ahead of things to protect and support these communities, ramp up testing and contact tracing to find where chains of transmission are occurring. And while we make our own way down this mountain together, I remain encouraged by the patience, cooperation, and kindness of Canadians who are making the path easier whenever they are needed. To raise our spirits and keep us going, I'd like to share a couple of the many inspiring examples of Canadians who are joining the call for volunteers. Some are helping to get needed supplies to the front lines, while others are joining the front lines themselves, where possible, to help those in need. Many of these efforts have started as grassroots initiatives by everyday Canadians using their skills, creativity, ingenuity, and generosity to help in any way they can. A great example is Conquer COVID, that began like the little engine that could in one family's home in Markham, Ontario, until it picked up steam from two of Canada's big names. Olympian and hockey legend Hayley Wickenheiser and actor Ryan Reynolds joined forces with Conquer COVID out of a shared goal to provide PPE for our healthcare workers. Another Olympian, Joni Rochette, having just received her medical degree last week, is now heading straight to work to help in long-term care homes in Quebec as they bear the brunt of this epidemic. These Canadians exemplify what it takes to get down this mountain. The precision and the grit of an Olympian with a can-do attitude and a readiness to help others. To all the Canadians who are helping in innumerable ways, we thank you.
Okay. Merci, Dr. New.
Thank you very much, Dr. New.
We'll hear from our Minister of Indigenous Services, Mark Miller. Mark, please.
Good afternoon. Bonjour.
Good afternoon.
As of April 29th, there have been 129 COVID-19 cases in First Nation communities on reserve and 16 confirmed cases in Nunavut's Inuit communities. As stated by Drs. Tam and New, this morning brings confirmation of the first COVID-19 case in Pond Inlet, Nunavut. With the community and the territorial government, we will be giving this our full attention to ensure appropriate contact tracing and maximum containment efforts are undertaken. To date, over $690 million in funding has been directly allocated by Indigenous Services towards the health response to COVID-19. This includes activities undertaken directly by the department, such as procurement of supplies and nursing services, as well as the preparedness measures being undertaken by communities.
Indigenous Services Canada continues and will continue to keep individual safety equipment for First Nations and supplies. This is for healthcare professionals who are taking care of patients sick with COVID-19. To date, we have sent several orders of PPE and surgical masks across the country. We want to support them during this pandemic, and we continue to rapidly respond to demand within 24 hours.
The COVID-19 pandemic is impacting Indigenous communities in many ways. Whether there are cases or not, or close to their communities, people find themselves experiencing distress, anxiety, and uncertainty. This is particularly the case for people who are at higher risk or the family members of those who are at high risk. These are real and understandable reactions, and there are mental wellness supports available to help. It's important to underscore that many communities and service providers are adapting their operations to respect the requirement for physical distancing, and they should continue to do so. For example, in our case, we have increased the number of crisis intervention counselors on shift at the Hope for Wellness helpline, which is now receiving more than 100 calls and chats a week linked to COVID-19. The Hope for Wellness helpline is available to provide immediate, culturally safe, telephone crisis intervention support for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the number is 1-855-242-3310. The online chat is hopeforwellness.ca in English and in French, and upon request in Cree, Ojibwe, and Inuktitut. Le financement a été versé.
The funding was paid to the Indigenous Community Fund, including $15 million for urban populations. As previously announced, additional funding was also sent to support shelters that offer essential support to women and children that are fleeing violence on the reserves. We've announced support for Indigenous communities and for post-secondary students. I would like to say that more support will be necessary, and we will continue to work with communities at every step of the process to ensure that we meet their needs.
It should come as no surprise to anyone who knows someone that has worn the uniform that today our nation grieves, and in the face of uncertainty, the members of the Canadian Armed Forces are stepping up to help those most in need. These are people that are prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for Canada, and that is just a small window into the character of these people. Across the country, we have seen Rangers and Canadian Armed Forces members stand up and step up where Canadians need it most. In our long-term care facilities, in areas with acute resource needs, and in remote areas of the country. They've done this unfailingly and with a level of grace and professionalism that we've come to expect from the Canadian Armed Forces. And today they do so, most certainly, with heavy hearts.
We understand that seniors in long-term care homes are particularly vulnerable to this virus, and their health and safety are our utmost priority. We are deeply concerned by the spread of this virus across the country, and we recognize the tragic events that took place in Quebec long-term care homes. That is why we've provided support to these institutions that are affected by COVID-19. Thanks to the use of the Canadian Armed Forces, the Red Cross, and Health Canada volunteers, resources have been mobilized to help Quebec get through this tough time. We always do this when an emergency situation threatens our citizens. The Canadian Armed Forces do everything they can to help those who are in need. To date, roughly 500 medical personnel and CIF support members have been deployed in long-term care homes in Quebec. This will help doctors and nurses locally to ensure that they can manage patients and provide health care to those who are in long-term care facilities. We will also help with the coordination of nursing and logistics needs and provide individual protection for those who work in long-term care homes. Moreover, roughly 160 Canadian Rangers employed in Basse-Côte-Nord and Nunavik will provide general and logistical support locally by creating mobile clinics and by guiding the local population.
To work in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and as provinces, territories, and cities start discussing the eventual easing of restrictions, we will continue to be extremely vigilant. By working together, we're flattening the curve, and we'll continue this together with work in all communities, secure in the knowledge that we will all keep our fellow citizens safe. By working together, we're saving lives. Miigwech, Nakumik, thank you, merci.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Now, I give the floor to the President of the Treasury Board, Mr. Duclos. Thank you, Christian. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to also say that our hearts go out to the families and friends of the victims of the terrible crash of the helicopter that took place in the Mediterranean Sea. And like the Deputy Prime Minister said, our thoughts are with you during this very difficult and painful time. Talking about commitment at the Canadian Armed Forces, I would like to quickly talk about the deployment and the work of the CHF in long-term care homes in Quebec, where there's also a tragic situation that affects thousands of vulnerable seniors. And 125 medical technicians were deployed in 5 care homes after the request that the Quebec government made on April 23rd. In recent days, we have seen the deployment of 320 other members of the Canadian Armed Forces in 8 long-term traditional care homes, a total of nearly 500 members in total, and roughly 550 soon. We also expect the deployment of many Canadian Armed Forces in 7 other long-term care homes in Quebec, and this will give us the opportunity to thank the members of the CAF and also the members of various institutions and long-term care homes for their very strong work that is highly appreciated. And we also like to thank the representatives and the officials of all levels of government that allow us to cooperate together to provide services and to support seniors who so need this care. Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Yves. We're now ready to answer your questions.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. So as usual, we'll start on the phone with 3 questions, 1 question, 1 follow-up. Opérateur.
Thank you. Merci. The first question is from Emily Bergeron from Agence QMI. La première question de Emily Bergeron de l'agence QMI. Your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Hello, my question is for Mr. Duclos. It is about the assistance provided by the Canadian Armed Forces in long-term care homes. You've said that there will be care provided to 8 new care homes. Can we get an idea of which long-term care homes you're talking about and how many personnel will be sent per institution and what will be done exactly? And sir, thank you very much for your question. Yes, there are 5, 8, and 7 numbers. So there are 125 members that were deployed, 8 additional long-term care homes that received members for a total of between 550 members that will be deployed very soon in these care homes. There are some members that are already there, and we expect the deployment to be completed by May 11th. Roughly, there are nurses that are there, medical technicians and support staff to support the medical personnel. And there's also other support for other tasks that are necessary in long-term care homes. And there are variable needs, and they also are changing. And this is always done under the leadership of the government of Quebec and in cooperation with the Quebec government. In terms of the number of the long-term care homes, this will be the names rather. This will be communicated very shortly and separately. Follow-up question. Thank you. In terms of these teams of personnel, you've mentioned nurses, medical technicians. How many military personnel have training in medicine versus those who aren't trained, who are just there to serve meals, for example? Answer, in terms of that, that's more technical on the health side, and I will give the floor to Dr. New. However, what I can tell you generally is that there's a key balance between medical responsibilities and support responsibilities to other types of services. We're talking here about taking care of sick people, so we do have to have medical personnel. And they also have to provide meals, do certain personal care activities, clean the material that's being used. They have to take care of the environment and the facilities, take care of the movement and of personnel, and make sure they have the necessary equipment for these long-term care homes. So the Canadian Armed Forces are well equipped to do these activities. And we do recognize that what tasks are done depends on the long-term care homes in question. I don't have much to add to what Mr. Duclos has just said. Yes, the Canadian Armed Forces, with their personnel, obviously have the necessary skills. The needs are changing, and we're working in cooperation with the Quebec government and for these long-term care facilities. We have to examine what the needs are, and we will better understand what every person can do. In terms of doctors, there may be skills for them, activities that meet their qualifications, but the situation is evolving, and we'll have more details in coming days.
Thank you, Dr. Operator. Next question, please.
Thank you. The next question is from Ryan Tumilty from National Post. Your line is open. You may proceed with your question.
Yeah, hi there. I'm asking today about the commercial rent subsidy program that the government's announced. Hearing a lot of concerns from businesses that they have to show a 70% reduction in revenue as compared to the 30% reduction in revenue for the wage subsidy. I'm wondering why this 70% threshold was set.
Well, thank you for the question. As we know, and as is important to be reminded of, this is part of a broad package to support the economy and, most importantly, our workers through this very difficult situation. So these measures are emergency measures. They are there to help businesses and workers in their specific circumstances. As is the case with other measures, there are criteria so that we can allocate the resources to those that are most in need. These criteria both take into account the importance of the needs, but the ability of the federal government to be helpful in a manner which is complementary to the work of provinces and territories. Because in this particular context, as you well know, the agreements were necessary and important in order to implement the program, because regulations around rent, regulations around the operation of all the relationships between owners and renters, that's all guided and enforced by provinces and territories. So that's why those rules were designed with provinces and territories and will be implemented in collaboration and in support to provinces and territories.
Follow up.
Yeah, so are you saying that there was resistance when you were negotiating with the provinces of setting the revenue drop at the same level as the wage subsidy? And I guess also as part of the program, commercial landlords have to have a mortgage outstanding to qualify for the program. I'm wondering about why that provision is part of the package.
So briefly, two things. First, indeed, we came to a quick agreement with provinces and territories on the best way to join forces and implement support to businesses, and small businesses in particular, in the context of the very severe pressures that they are facing in the crisis. And second, that ongoing work will require the collaboration of the banking sector because it's been identified as key in support to owners and renters, and that's why those specific parameters were specified in both the agreement and the announcement.
Thank you, Minister. Operator, next question, please.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question est de Lina Dib de la Presse canadienne. Votre ligne est ouverte. Vous pouvez poser votre question.
Question. Good afternoon, Mr. Duclos. I'd like to talk to you about the CERB. Your government reached an agreement with the opposition yesterday to do certain things for students and make some adjustments. Will there be a delay in the implementation of the CERB for students? Answer. Thank you for reminding everyone that we were able to work effectively with the opposition parties yesterday. What we saw yesterday was that all parties realized the importance of helping our students. I was a teacher for many years, and I was also a student myself before that, and I know how an economic crisis can have very serious effects on students, not only during the time when they study, because often they'll wonder if it's worth continuing their studies, which is a serious situation for them and also for our society as a whole, but also when they get out of their studies, when they want to take on a job, the economic crisis could have a negative impact on them, even in the very longer term. So yesterday's results were very important. The Senate, if I understand correctly, will soon ratify this legislation, and this will bring us to the next step. We're all aware that the next step will happen quickly, namely the implementation of the system that will allow students to receive the CERB. And we've seen how much we can count on the skills and commitments of the public servants in Canada to rapidly implement this program for students. And there are 7 million recipients of the CERB, and many Canadians that were skeptical about our ability to offer such a sizable assistance program so quickly, well, they've now seen that we're able to do this. A follow-up, Mr. Duclos. My question was about the regulations that you'll have to adjust. Will that delay the implementation of the CERB? And do you have a figure about the number of requests for wage subsidies from companies? And do you see this as an indication that people are turning away from the CERB and asking for the wage subsidy? Well, you've asked a lot of very good questions. It's hard to answer all the questions that are asked. In terms of the regulations, the new specifications that were made yesterday will allow us to rapidly incorporate regulations to implement the CERB for students. And in terms of your question, repeat it once again, please. Could you repeat your question, please? You had 3 other questions, I think. They were all connected to each other. Yes, the number of companies asking for the wage subsidy. Unfortunately, I can't give you an answer about that. I think it was about 60,000 yesterday, if I remember correctly. But we expect this number to continue to rise because there's a great need for the wage subsidy. And as you know, we have to ensure that companies can continue to pay their workers so that workers can continue to be available for the economy when it starts up again. Thank you very much, Minister. We'll take a question from the room.
Guess we'll start with Ashley from CBC.
It's actually Annie Bergeron-Oliver from CTV. That's okay, though. We're both blonde. My first question is to Dr. Tam. Yesterday, the City of Ottawa told families to stop visiting their loved ones through the windows at the 4 city-run seniors' homes. I'm wondering if this directive is taking physical distancing measures too far, or if this is something you support.
Well, I know that the Medical Office of Health in Ottawa is very much engaged with her community, so I don't know the specifics of this setup, but I think that question is best left to her. But of course, I certainly recognize how difficult it is for families not to be able to see their loved ones in these in the long-term care homes. So I think our collective advice is to just do that safely.
Okay, and second question. A second Canadian healthcare worker, a PSW from Peel, has died as a direct result of COVID-19. Her union says that too many frontline workers, especially PSWs, do not have adequate access to protective equipment, and they don't have the necessary protections in place to keep them safe. What do you say to workers who feel that governments at various different levels are not protecting them adequately? And are you aware of any provinces or municipalities who are facing any direct shortages right now of PPE?
Well, I know that our teams are working, every day to look and forecast any needs from the different provinces and territories, so that PPE can be allocated. I think I can't comment on the specific distribution down to the front line, but I know that for sure all chief medical officers and their recommendations that we have to protect our frontline workers.
We are going to pull away from this federal briefing on the federal government's response to COVID-19, as well as, of course, public health officials federally. A couple of things there of note. I would say 129 cases have now been identified on First Nations reserves in this country, and the first case has been detected now in Nunavut, in Pond Inlet. It had been completely case-free until now, so the first case there that they obviously tracking very closely in Nunavut. I will also just say that we are expecting a cabinet meeting today by the Prime Minister and his government, where they have many things to discuss, the pandemic, of course, but also the possibility of further restrictions for assault weapons in this country. The Prime Minister also expected to have a call with Premier and territorial leaders later today. These calls are now happening on a weekly basis, in large part to talk about the reopening of the economy, which, as you know, is happening at a different pace depending on where you live inside this country. But much of the focus for the government today on this downing of on this accident that has happened off the coast of Greece. One helicopter involved in a NATO mission and 6 Canadians on board, and that's where I will leave it and hand it over to Andrew Nichols for his ongoing coverage of that story. Andrew.
And Rosie, thank you. I am Andrew Nichols, and this is CBC News Network, and we are following that story. A number of breaking and developing stories for you today. 1 Canadian crew member found dead, 5 more missing in the crash of a military helicopter off the coast of Greece. Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra from Nova Scotia was on the Cyclone chopper that crashed on a NATO training exercise. The search continues for the 5 others.
All of them are heroes. Each of them will leave a void that cannot be filled.